Our top story tonight, a lightning fast fall from grace tonight for President Trump's national security advisor.
Michael Flynn has just resigned after only 1 month on the job. His credibility has been under attack for weeks now, and tonight he admitted he misled the vice president and senior White House staffers.
Now, KCAL9 political reporter Bryan joins us now with more on this dramatic announcement that happened just not too long ago.
Within the hour, literally, and plenty of drama in Washington tonight, I can tell you that. The development came fast and furious during the night after a Washington Post report that a former acting attorney general, who was later fired by President Trump, told the Trump White House last month that National Security Advisor Michael Flynn misled the administration about his communications with Russian officials. And now Flynn has called it quits. In his resignation statement Monday night, National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who had been under fire for weeks now about his phone conversations concerning sanctions with the Russian ambassador, confirmed the accusations. He wrote, "Unfortunately, because of the fast pace of events, I inadvertently briefed the vice president-elect and others with incomplete information regarding my phone calls with the Russian ambassador. I have sincerely apologized to the president and the vice president, and they have accepted my apology. I am tendering my resignation, honored to have served our nation and the American people in such a distinguished way." Flynn's downfall came after a series of disclosures on Monday.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sally Yates.
Monday evening, the Washington Post reported former acting Attorney General Sally Yates not only informed the White House in January that Flynn gave misleading information to the White House about his communications with the Russian ambassador, but also warned that Flynn was potentially vulnerable to Russian blackmail. Yates was later fired by President Trump for refusing to defend Mr. Trump's travel ban executive order. Now Politico reports that retired four-star General David Petraeus is one of several successors being considered to replace Flynn. CBS News reports Flynn joined other senior White House officials in the front row of a presidential news conference Monday, his job hanging in the balance. Despite this, from presidential counselor Kellyanne Conway.
Yes, General Flynn does enjoy the full confidence of the president, and this is a big week for General Flynn. He's the point of contact for many of these foreign visits.
But just an hour later, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer released a statement saying the president is evaluating the situation. He's speaking to Vice President Pence relative to the conversation the vice president had with General Flynn, and also speaking to various other people about what he considers the single most important subject there is, our national security. The FBI and other agencies are investigating Flynn conversations with the Russian ambassador before President Trump's inauguration about possibly lifting the sanctions against Russia. Flynn denied discussing U.S. sanctions on Russia. Then he may have lied about it to Vice President Mike Pence, who backed up Flynn in mid-January.
Those conversations that happened to occur around the time that the United States took action to expel diplomats had nothing whatsoever to do with those sanctions.
But after hearing that statement from Pence, the Washington Post reporter who broke the story Monday says acting Attorney General Yates and other officials informed Trump administration officials that Pence's statement was not true.
They knew, because they had read the intelligence, that that was not accurate. And so at that point, they knew that also the Russians knew themselves that what was being said was inaccurate. And the fear was that basically the Russians could try to use that information to put that over Flynn and to try to put pressure on him. And obviously also they were very concerned that the vice president-elect, Pence, seemed to have been misled.
Now Senator Ben Cardin and other Democrats are demanding answers.
We need an independent investigation. I think General Flynn, we need to know exactly what conversations he had with the Russians during the transition period.
Now tonight, President Trump has named retired Lieutenant General Joseph Keith Kellogg Jr. as acting National Security Advisor. Kellogg is a decorated Army veteran who served from 1967 to 2003. He supported and was an advisor to President Trump during the presidential campaign. So plenty to deal with tonight, in Washington and here as well.
What impact do you think this will have on the Trump administration, maybe even national security?
Well, it could definitely have a serious impact. First of all, you have your national security advisor resign under circumstances like this only 24 days into the Trump administration. It's embarrassing. Second, it now becomes the focus of charges that this administration is in turmoil, and it comes just a week after the courts put the brakes on the Trump travel ban executive order. One of the problems is that the administration is in such a hurry that it's getting things wrong and making mistakes. And at the same time, it reopens the issue of Russian involvement and intrusion, not only in the U.S. election, but now in the Trump administration. And you can be sure the Democrats will pounce on that, Jeff.